Welcome to our very first live worldwide interactive event. We are here tonight breaking new ground. Nothing like this has ever been attempted before. Right now, you all are online with me from every corner on our planet. Places like Albania, Bolivia, Cambodia, Ecuador, Finland, Hong Kong, China, India, Zimbabwe, Australia, Canada, the UK, and the rest of Europe, along with, of course, all 50 states here in our United States of America. Over 139 countries are represented in our class tonight. Welcome to you all. So I want to get started. This is the most exciting thing I've ever done. I've done a lot of things in my life, but I am most proud of the fact that all of you have joined us in this global community to talk about what I believe is one of the most important subjects and presented by one of the most important books of our time, A New Earth, Awakening to Your Life's Purpose. I don't think there's anything more important than awakening and also knowing what your purpose is. And for the next 10 weeks, author and spiritual teacher Eckhart Tolle and I will be here in our virtual classroom here on Oprah.com every Monday, 8 p.m., be on time for class, 8 p.m. Central. We're going to be answering your emails. We're going to be having a conversation about each chapter and taking your calls from around the world and your emails from around the world and seeing some of you around the world through our Skype phones. I'm sure you've already noticed that you can type in your questions on the right side of your screen and send that to us instantly. And we will, we have a whole team of people here who are ready, but waiting, standing by to take your calls and emails. And of course, I'm honored to introduce the author of this great book, A New Earth, Awakening to Your Life's Purpose, Eckhart Tolle.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
How exciting is this?
Yeah.
It's very good. Okay, so let's get class started. The way we're going to work the class is that we will have a conversation and take your calls and your questions whenever we feel appropriate. First of all, I wanted to just talk to you about how this book came to you. I was introduced to this book several months ago when I was interviewing Eckhart Tolle on XM Radio. I have a show on XM Radio. Many people know about it, but it's called the Soul Series. And on that show, I get to talk to anybody I choose, and I choose to speak to people who represent this kind of thinking, this genre of spirituality. And we talk about the soul. So I was interviewing Eckhart Tolle several months ago about his book, The Power of Now, because that's really all I knew about Eckhart Tolle was The Power of Now. I call you the father of now, The Power of Now, which that book was a life-changing book for me, given to me many years ago, about 8 years ago, by Meg Ryan, who's on the show. And the producer, Corny, came in and said, well, as I was preparing, she said, there's this other book he's written called A New Earth. And I just had time to thumb through A New Earth and not really give it its due because I was focused on reading The Power of Now and talking to you about that. And after our interview, started to read this book, and it was absolutely, I felt the shift that you talk about, that you say on page 7 that this will be meaningless to you or you will feel the shift. I started to feel the shift. And one of the things that really occurred to me as I was going through various chapters and having aha moment after another is how clear this message is. What a clear channel it seemed to come through for you. It was like I'd never, didn't know you or hadn't met you in person, even through the radio. We weren't sitting in the same studio. How did this come to be? How did this come through you, to you?
Well, it comes out of the space of stillness. That's where all creative endeavor is born. So it's getting in touch with the stillness within, where there's no mental noise. And out of that stillness, when the time is right, sometimes an impulse comes, something, a feeling, a strong sense that something wants to be born into this world. I had the same strong sense before writing The Power of Now. That was 13 years ago when I started writing it. I had left England, I was living in England, and I had this strong impulse one morning, and I was in England still, knowing I have to move to the west coast of North America without knowing why.
This is just a feeling you had.
Yes, a strong knowing. So it's not through a decision-making process, just the realization I have to move there. I don't know why, but I have to go. It was such a total, absolutely no doubt about it. So I moved to Vancouver, and then I took a Greyhound bus to California, knew only one or two people. And I said, why am I here? 3 weeks passed, somebody put me up in a room near San Francisco, and suddenly I bought a notepad, and suddenly the strong stream came through, and I wrote, what is enlightenment? The beginning of The Power of Now. The moment I wrote that, I knew this is the book that wants to be born. So rather than me wanting to write a book, there was a book that wanted to be written.
It's like Michelangelo says, the angel's in the marble, and he just cuts away the marble.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and I find, I'll come back to that in a second, for most people, that is the approach to what is my purpose, to look at what the greater purpose is. What does the greater purpose want from me? What does life or God want from me, rather than what do I want from life? So that's the starting point. I know that sometimes in New Age you have the question, well, what do you want? It's fine to ask that question, but a more powerful question is, what does life want from me? How do I fit into what is the totality? What is my place within the whole? So this is how it started, as knowing that this is what life wants from me. The book wants to be born, and the same thing happened later with the New Earth. Again, a similar sense of, oh, there's another book that wants to come. I didn't know why, because everybody told me, well, you've said it all in The Power of Now. Why write another book? And intellectually, I couldn't have answered, why am I writing another book? And it happened.
And it happened. Were you asking life, universal energy? I don't know. What do you call that? Is a word? I call it God. What word do you use for that?
Consciousness.
Were you asking consciousness? Were you saying, what do you want from me?
Yes. There was a time, for quite a few years, I lived in England, and I just did some spiritual teaching on a very small scale, sometimes little workshops and so on.
I read in the paper today, in the USA Today, where you said you started out with 10 or 12 people in people's homes.
Yes, for quite a while I would teach in people's living rooms, invited a group of friends, and this was the beginning of informal spiritual teaching. And as I said to the person who interviewed me, this is coming full circle now, because now I'm back in people's living rooms, just more of them.
Just more of them. I think we have more than 10 or 12 joining us this evening. And so the book, would you sit and, passages would come to you? Would you, actively get up at a certain time and say, I'm going to write today, or know what you were going to write before it was written?
No, not knowing it beforehand, but every day there was the space for writing. Every morning, and until 2 in the afternoon or so, the space was set aside for writing. That was the writing space. And there were days when the flow was not very strong, so maybe only a few lines got written, or even none at all. Nevertheless, I always honored that space of, I'm ready for the writing to happen. I'm not saying that the writing happened automatically. My mind was involved. It wasn't a channeled book as such. It was inspired, but not channeled. So it involved my thinking processes too. But the thinking process had to be inspired from something deeper. You can't rely on your thinking processes only and produce something that is powerful and original.
So already you've shared with us that in order to awaken to your life's purpose, one of the key things we must do is not try to tell life what our purpose is, not go around even I don't know, trying to define for ourselves, because a lot of people say many times, I've done, seminars across the country, and they'll say, I don't know what my purpose is. You're saying you must ask life, what purpose does it have for you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And the answer may not immediately come. A very important part of asking life so that you can be ready to receive the answer is to practice inviting moments of stillness into your life so that you are not continuously absorbed in the incessant mental noise that we call thinking, most of which is unnecessary and repetitive. So to find spaces of stillness is vital if you want to get to the place where the answers are, potentially. So for quite a few years when I lived in England and did spiritual teaching on a small scale, sometimes I would say, okay, they could do much more. There's much more that I could do, I said to life. I'm ready. But life just waited and waited. And the answer didn't come for several years until that morning when it said, move.
Move. Move.
Yeah.
Move to Vancouver.
Yes, and why did I have to move to write it there? I didn't realize that. Every place, Vancouver and California, that's where the Power of Now was written. I was moving back and forth. I didn't have a home as such. I stayed with friends, moving back and forth. And so only later I realized I had to move because the energy field on the West Coast, this is what I needed for the book to be born. The energy field in England, although I love England, I have a deep inner connection with England, the energy field there was not right for, in my personal case, for this book to come out.
Wow.
So I only realized that after I had to go back to England, and then I stayed in a community because I didn't have a home of my own anymore. And I wanted to continue writing, but I couldn't do very much there because I thought, why can't I continue? The stream stopped. I could only do editing and correction. That was necessary too. But only when I went back to the West Coast, my visa had expired, I had to go to England, and I went back, immediately the flow came back. And I said, oh, now I know why I had to move. So it's often trusting life when a very strong impulse comes. But you may have to wait. It doesn't mean that you necessarily immediately obey every impulse, because impulses can also come from more superficial levels within yourself.
But you were wise enough to know the difference. You had discernment.
Yes.
Yes, to know the difference.
Yes.
Well, it's so interesting because you, in the beginning of A New Earth, start out talking about a flower. And I've heard many people because I go on the message boards every day. I'm loving you on the message boards, everybody. And many people are saying that they look at flowers differently now. I can certainly say that I do. And one of the things that you said that struck me when you said that they are representatives of the spiritual realm, and that when you are still, allow yourself to be still with a flower or a crystal or a bird or really anything of nature.
Yes.
But you used a flower specifically
because a flower is, nature on the whole is a beautiful access point into inner stillness if you can be there fully present. But a flower is even everything.
Say messengers from another realm.
Yes, like messengers. A flower is much more fragile than a plant. It is more fleeting, ethereal, I think is the word, more ethereal. So it has less density to it than most other things. It is and because of the lack of density, it's almost as if spirit could flow through it more freely. So when you contemplate a flower without too much interference of the thinking mind, to actually truly look, this is what Jesus said, by the way. I mean, in churches you hear Jesus saying, look at the lilies of the field.
Yes.
And so when he said that, he wasn't just saying, look at the lilies of the field. He
Aren't
said,
they
look.
pretty? Yes.
He said, look, you really have to look, because there is something that they embody, something that you also have, but because of all your anxiety about tomorrow and your thinking, that's what I'm translating very freely now, what Jesus said. Why are these flowers are not anxious, they are not concerned about tomorrow, and see how beautiful they are. how God clothes them in such beauty. And you can live like that also. So he used this natural realm and flowers to get people in touch with the dimension of depth within them.
Well, what's very interesting to me about all of this is that when I read that the first time, I thought it was, a beautiful passage. And then I read it a second time and awakened a little bit more and started to look at nature differently. I have live in a lovely space where I'm surrounded by flowers, not in Chicago, but in California. And, I always just appreciated the garden. Aren't they lovely and all the different colors and the roses and all that? And then I decided to move into the garden without naming it. What if I were like a babe?
Yes.
What if I were a babe,
Yes.
Learning what a flower was for the first time? What if I went out under the oaks that I love so much, but I didn't know it was an oak. I didn't know what to call it. And I shared this in one of our after shows, that for the first time, and I've loved trees all of my life, and the sense of power and stillness they represent, but by not naming those things in nature, that I felt a magical presence. I felt a sense of majesty and power and strength and connection that I'd never felt before.
Yes.
Because I didn't give it a name.
Yes, that's the key.
Yes, I didn't give it a name or have a reference for everything that a tree has meant in my life.
That's right.
Isn't it?
That's right. So being present with the perception. And this theme is perhaps the main theme running through the whole book, is that state where the compulsive naming of things,
Yes.
and you start with nature because that's easier to let go of the naming. Later we'll be talking about that in some future session.
Stop labeling people.
Yes, that's more difficult because people invite the labels.
Yes. Yes.
Because there's so much mind in everybody, and they label you and you label them. So, but with nature, this is the starting point to find a different relationship to nature. It doesn't mean that you need to forget what you have learned about trees or about flowers. When it's necessary, you can get that knowledge and you use it.
Right.
But not to be totally in the grip of what you have learned, of mental labels, of interpreting mentally, but being able to perceive, one could call it, perceive the flower, see it, through a background of just stillness.
Just stillness.
Which is really consciousness.
Yes. Well, I will tell you, it's an amazing, for all of those of you who've tried this, and I know some of you have because you've emailed us and said so, but when you start to walk through a park or walk in your backyard or begin to, and you're right, it's easier with nature than with people, and pretend that you don't know or just let yourself be in the space without labeling the things, it's just, everything's vibrating and it's like, scintillating.
Yes.
And everything's exciting.
Yes. And that's,
everything's exciting.
Yes. And
a walk through the park
right.
becomes exciting, and it's the same path you've always taken.
Yes. And before, when you were involved in your mind,
yes,
perhaps you didn't even see it.
Never saw it. I see. Yeah.
And so many people are so trapped in this continuous mental noise that absorbs their whole attention all the time. Every thought absorbs, this stream of thinking absorbs their attention. They don't see that the world around them is vitally alive.
Yeah.
So you become, gradually, as people then grow older, the world around them becomes more and more lifeless and dead.
Right, right.
And that happens to them also.
And why is that? Because?
That is because you are run by mental abstraction. All the concepts and the thoughts in the head are abstractions. It's not life.
So you can't take in the information that's there to be received all around you because you're so you're in your head.
You're in your head. You're not present.
All right.
So you're lost in thought. I could say that's the human condition, is being lost in thought. And people don't, and that of course is the famous, what we call the voice in the head.
The voice in the head.
Some people have been asking about.
Which we'll be talking a lot about, the voice in the head.
So some people say, what voice in the head? It's that one.
It's that one.